upon a time, in a quiet village on the outskirts of Accra, there lived a couple named Efua and Kojo. They had been married for 5 years, but lately, their once warm and peaceful home had become a battleground of words. The tension began after Kojo's mother, Mama Abina, came to stay with them. It had been 3 weeks since her arrival, and Efua was struggling to cope. Each morning, Efua woke up before dawn to clean the house and prepare their 2 children for school. Meanwhile, Mama Abina slept until mid-morning, only to wake up hungry and expecting breakfast to be ready. First, Efua tried to be patient. She reminded herself that Mama Abina was an elder and deserved respect. But as the days passed, frustration crept into her heart like a slow-growing fire. While Efua rushed around the house, Kojo sat in the living room, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to her exhaustion. No one offered to help. No one even noticed her struggles. One morning, as she scrambled to serve breakfast while tying her children's shoelaces, she couldn't hold it in any longer. "Kojo, I need help," she snapped, her voice filled with frustration. "I can't do everything alone. We should hire a housekeeper." Kojo barely looked up from his phone. "Only lazy women need housekeepers," he scoffed. "You're young and strong. How hard is it to cook and take care of just 2 children?" Efua stood frozen, his words hitting her like a slap. Kojo walked away without a second glance, still smiling at his phone as though her struggles were nothing more than background noise. A sharp pain clenched Efua's chest, not just from exhaustion but from the painful truth that her husband no longer saw her, no longer cared about her burden. She clenched her fists, her breathing shallow with anger, as Kojo disappeared into the bedroom. She was left standing there alone, with Mama Abina's endless demands and a growing storm of resentment brewing in her heart. Later that night, as Efua lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she knew she had to make a choice. She could continue like this, unappreciated, unheard, and drowning in responsibilities, or she could take a stand. The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. But instead of rushing to the kitchen, she got dressed, packed a small bag and walked out of the house. By the time Kojo woke up, Efua was nowhere to be found. At first, he assumed she had gone to work early, but when Mama Abina called out from her room complaining about breakfast, he reached for his phone to call her, only to realize that her number was switched off. The children were still asleep, and for the first time, Kojo felt a wave of panic. He hurriedly got them out of bed and tried to prepare them for school. While struggling to make their lunch, his mother strolled out, stretching and yawning. "Kojo, where is my breakfast?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. His head pounded. Her voice felt like a hammer against his skull. The children were asking for their school shoes, the kitchen was a mess. His shirt was drenched in sweat, and the smell of burnt yam filled the air. He barely had time to look at his mother as she clapped her hands impatiently. "Where is that wife of yours?" she scoffed. "Has she finally lost her mind? How can she still be sleeping when the whole house is in a mess?" Kojo clenched his jaw. "She's not here," he admitted, dialing her number again. Still switched off. The children tugged at his trousers, reminding him that they were late for school. He could barely think. Mama Abina sighed dramatically as she sat on the couch. "You see, this is the problem with modern wives. No patience, no endurance. She left her home just because of small stress. In my day, a woman never complained, even when she was exhausted to her bones." Kojo snapped. He spun around, his eyes blazing. "Mama, please," he shouted. "Enough." His mother's mouth hung open in shock. Kojo wanted his wife back, but his pride would not let him admit it. Efua had left without warning and maybe, just maybe, his mother was right after all. Perhaps he needed a woman who understood her duty and did it without complaints. Convincing himself that he was making the right decision, he agreed when his mother introduced Akojua, a young woman from their village, to move into his home. Akojua was hard-working and obedient. She woke up early to clean the house and prepare breakfast. She even ran his bath and made sure the children were dressed and ready for school on time. Kojo couldn't believe how easy life had become. No nagging, no complaints, just peace. Akojua ensured that fresh food was always on the table, and Kojo couldn't help but thank his mother for bringing such a woman into his life. "Mama, I never knew women like this still existed," he said, feeling pleased. Mama Abina smiled knowingly. "You see, my son, this is what a proper wife looks like. No shouting, no stress. Just respect and hard work." Kojo nodded, watching Akojua sweep the living room with a gentle smile on her face. It had been weeks, and he had made no effort to look for Efua. He convinced himself that she had abandoned her family, and that was enough reason to move on. But the children were not as convinced. They missed their mother. One evening, as they sat in the living room, his youngest child, Kwame, looked up at him with teary eyes. "Daddy, where is Mommy?" he asked softly. "Your mother abandoned you," Kojo said firmly. "Akojua is your new mother now. Treat her as such and stop thinking about that useless woman." "No," Kwame cried, shaking his head. "Mommy didn't abandon us. She loves us." His older sister Adwoa folded her arms and glared at him. "You and Grandma chased her away." Kojo's heart skipped a beat. Mama Abina scoffed. "Nonsense. Your mother left on her own. She was tired of taking care of you too. She saw you as a burden." The children stared at her, their young eyes filled with confusion and hurt. Kojo felt a strange unease creep into his heart, but he quickly brushed it aside. He had made his choice, there was no turning back. "What's going on here?" Kojo's voice cut through the noise, his sharp tone demanding answers. Mama Abina turned to him, her hands trembling with rage as she pointed at Akojua. "This useless village girl burned my clothes. Can you imagine the insult?" Kojo's eyes shifted to the pile of scorched fabric on the floor. His jaw tightened. He turned to Akojua, his voice low but firm. "Why would you burn my mother's clothes?" Akojua's face twisted with anger. "Why is your mother so lazy?" she shot back. "Didn't your grandmother teach her anything?" A stunned silence filled the room. Mama Abina's mouth fell open in disbelief. Never in her life had she been spoken to like this. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice shaking with fury. Akojua folded her arms and stepped forward. "I called you a lazy old woman because that's exactly what you are," she said without hesitation. "You don't lift a finger, yet you expect everyone to serve you like a queen. You sit around all day, barking orders, treating people like slaves." She scoffed, shaking her head. "What kind of woman hands another woman her dirty undergarments to wash? Are you not ashamed of yourself?" Mama Abina could hardly breathe. Her eyes widened in shock, her face pale with humiliation. Kojo stood frozen, watching the scene unfold, feeling a strange, unsettling weight settle in his chest. Akojua glared at Kojo, her voice laced with finality. "Find another woman to destroy," she spat before Mama Abina could utter a word. She grabbed her suitcase, swung the door open and walked out, slamming it behind her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mama Abina collapsed onto the couch, her chest rising and falling heavily. "Kojo, my son, you must go after her. She cannot just leave like that," she pleaded. But Kojo didn't move. He stood frozen, staring at the door. First he had lost Efua. And now, the woman he had praised for being so hardworking was gone too. For the first time in his life, Kojo admitted to himself that it was all his fault. His pride, his stubbornness, his refusal to listen had cost him everything. Slowly he turned to his mother, his voice eerily calm. "Mama, you need to leave my house." Mama Abina sat up in shock. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," Kojo said firmly. "Whatever you need I will send to you, but please stay away from my home." Her mouth fell open. "I am your mother, Kojo. Are you telling me that you're choosing that ungrateful wife of yours over me?" Kojo let out a bitter laugh. "This is not about choosing, Mama. This is about fixing my life before it's too late." Kojo sat alone, haunted by the weight of his mistakes. He thought about Efua, how much she had sacrificed while he dismissed her pain. His children, Kwame and Adwoa, barely spoke to him. They missed their mother terribly. Every night, Adwoa knelt by her bed, praying for her safe return. Months passed, and the exhaustion deepened. The house felt hollow without Efua's warmth. Kojo longed for a miracle, something, anything, to undo the damage he had caused. Just as he sat in the living room, lost in thought, his phone rang. He hesitated before answering. "Hello. This is Dr. Mensah from Ridge Hospital," a woman's voice said. "Your wife, Efua, is here. She just gave birth." Kojo's breath caught in his throat. "What?" he whispered, gripping the phone tighter. "Yes, sir. She delivered a healthy baby boy today," the doctor confirmed. "She has been here for months under observation due to a high-risk pregnancy." Kojo's hands began to shake. She was pregnant. Yes, the doctor confirmed. She checked herself in because she couldn't afford any stress. That's why she left. The words hit him like a hammer. Efua hadn't left because she wanted to abandon them. She had left to protect herself and their unborn child. Regret crashed over him. Without another word, he grabbed his keys and raced out of the house. His heart pounded as he sped to the hospital, praying it wasn't too late to make things right. "I've changed, Efua," Kojo said, his voice thick with emotion. "These months without you have opened my eyes. I've been doing everything you used to do, and now I truly understand how much you carried alone. I'm sorry, Efua. I failed you, and I want to make it right." Efua studied him for a long moment. She couldn't afford to return to the chaos that had once drained her. She needed certainty. "If you want me to come home, Kojo, then I have one condition," she said firmly. "Hire a housekeeper first." Kojo didn't hesitate. "Done," he said, nodding without a second thought. Efua sighed, looking down at the newborn sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I will come home, Kojo, but I need proof that life will be different for me. Before I set foot in that house, I want to see that a housekeeper has been hired." She met his eyes, her voice steady. "And before that, I want you to handle the house and the children by yourself for another month, without complaining. I need to know that you truly understand what it means to care for a home before I return." Kojo swallowed hard. His throat tightened as he realized she was giving him a test, one that he had no choice but to pass. A whole month. Kojo thought about the long nights of exhaustion, the endless chores, and the demands of two children who still longed for their mother. He had barely survived the past few months, but then he looked at Efua, tired yet strong. This was a woman who had carried their family for years without help, a woman who had nearly broken under the weight of stress. And now, for the first time, Kojo truly saw her. He knew better than to argue. Efua noticed something different in him, something she had longed for years to see: humility. The next day, as Kojo left the hospital, he went straight to hire a housekeeper, ensuring she would start in a month's time. He then returned home and took on the full responsibility of managing the house and caring for the children. For the first time, Kojo understood that running a home wasn't just a woman's duty. It was a full-time responsibility that required teamwork. When the month passed, Efua finally returned home with their newborn son in her arms. The children ran to her, wrapping their little arms around her, their faces lighting up with joy. The housekeeper was already in place, managing the chores. Kojo stood by the door, relief and gratitude written all over his face. Efua looked around. The house was spotless. The children were happy. And for the first time, she saw her husband as a true partner, not just a man who expected everything to be done for him. That was how Kojo learned a valuable lesson: never undermine the struggles of others. The lessons from this story are clear. Marriage is a partnership that thrives on teamwork, empathy, and shared responsibilities. Pride, neglect, and external interference can destroy a home, while listening, respect, and mutual support strengthen it. Women should not be overburdened with household duties alone, and seeking help is never a sign of weakness. Managing a home is demanding, and everyone should contribute rather than take others' efforts for granted. I hope you enjoyed this story.